Hey everyone, this is the exclusive buyer brokerage engagement agreement updated July 1st, 2024. This is the new agreement that takes into consideration the new NAR rules and being more transparent with our clients. The good news is there's not really a lot that's different here, but there's just a couple nuances. So let's go over those. Basically, the upper part is pretty much the same. The buyer and the undersigned exclusive buyer brokerage engagement agreement for in consideration mutual promise contained herein and other good valuable consideration the undersigned buyers and the undersigned broker herein buyer's broker do hereby enter into this exclusive buyer brokerage engagement agreement on the terms and conditions set forth herein. The term still the date of it starts on whatever date, ends on whatever date. I typically, depending on the buyer, I will do minimum of 3 months. I typically do 6 months myself. Agency and brokerage. Our office allows everything. You may do dual agency with permission from Melba. I typically don't unless it's a very specific situation. I usually will refer out to another agent if this is, if I have a listing and I have an unrepresented buyer. I'd rather not have to worry about that and get a referral fee as opposed to worry about whether I disclose something on either side that I'm not supposed to. Anyway, if the broker offers dual agency as one of the agency relationships, the buyer does or does not consent to the broker acting in dual agency capacity. You can put do because you just don't know if they're going to end up buying one of your listings if you even have one or not. But I typically put does, and we can readdress that if we need to down the road. Compensation. This is really the most important thing, okay? Generally, compensation of brokers negotiated is not set by state law. However, this does not obligate individual licensees and brokerage firms to necessarily negotiate their compensation. Compensation to the buyer's broker. Buyer agrees to pay the buyer's broker the compensation set forth below at the closing of any contract to purchase as that term is herein defined. You're going to mark whatever is applicable, but for most of us, it's going to be 3. And you mark the 3 check mark, then you type in 3, and then you put the number 3 here. Part of that is some people's writing, especially if they're handwriting it, not very clear. So we want to make sure that's clear. If you are doing a fee base, like maybe you're buying something for someone and you're only charging them, I don't know, $1,000, $2,500 just to write the contract, then you would do the second box there. Or if there's something else, I'm not even sure what a good example would be, you would put it in that box. Optional compensation from seller or seller's broker to buyer's broker. Buyer hereby approves or disapproves buyer's broker receiving compensation from seller or seller's broker. Nothing herein should be interpreted as a promise by seller or seller's broker to pay or offer to pay compensation to the buyer's broker herein. If a buyer approves such compensation being paid by the seller and or seller's broker to the buyer's broker, the maximum amount of the buyer's broker may receive from the seller and or the seller's broker is as follows. And I'm actually going to change this because I was using this for another example. I am going to put 5% maximum, and here is why. And I'm going to type out 5 and I'm going to put in 5. On occasion, depending on what the market's like, the new home builders in particular may offer an incentive to agents to come to new homes to try to sell those. Just depends on the market conditions. So if that's the case and you have just 3 there, then if there is a bonus, you are not technically allowed to have it. So, and that's how you would explain it to your buyer if there is a bonus. Now, that doesn't mean you might not share part of that bonus with your buyer towards closing costs, should you choose to. However, you wouldn't be able to receive it without having a different number than the above number in here. So that's what you want to do that or put in there. Same would be a dollar amount you could put in there too if you wanted to. I've seen some people put $10,000. However, that could be construed as being a total of $10,000 commission. So if it's $1 million house, I'm pretty sure you want, and you're able to negotiate the full 3%, I'm pretty sure you want that instead. Section D, possible reduction in buyer's compensation obligation to buyer's broker. Any compensation buyer's broker receives from seller or seller's broker shall, and you're going to mark one of these boxes. I typically am going to tell my buyers we're going to reduce it, the compensation buyer shall pay to the buyer's broker dollar for dollar. So a good example of this is, let's say, for example, the seller's broker is, or the seller is paying 2%. So you're going to reduce the buyer's obligation to you from 3% then down to 1% that they maybe can compensate you. Remember, compensation can also happen through closing costs now, and that's a whole other video. So anyway, take that into consideration. But I always put reduce the compensation buyer shall pay to buyer's broker dollar for dollar. Because remember, as an agent, you never get paid directly from anybody. It always goes through the brokerage. Separate compensation on lease, that hasn't changed. You don't need to worry about that. Protected period, length of the period, I put 180 days. I want to make sure my buyers are locked in. Of course, we can always fire each other during the process, and that's fine. Remember, the protection period is if they decide to next weekend go out and find out or go see a house that you've showed them already, but write a contract with a different agent. You're protected, and they would be obligated to pay you that 3% if they close on that property. And then the rest of it's all pretty standard, but those are the updates on that. Hope that was helpful.